Hey guys, what's up everybody? It's the Knife's Meow, and today I want to go over a few tips for hand sanding titanium, or to get a mirror polished for titanium. These are things that I wish I had known when I first started out, because they're, you start out, you don't really know what you're doing, and you think it'd be really easy picking up a piece of titanium and some sandpaper and just sanding. I mean, sanding, that part's easy, I guess, but getting a mirror polished, that part's not so easy. So I want to go over a few things, and just a few tips. So I look disgusting, so I'm working on another video that I'm blasting and doing things for a customer, and I like to show my process, and it was one of those where I disassemble and everything like that. And then so I started working on this piece of the pry bar, started sanding it, and then I had the urge to go ahead and make this video about sanding. I see a lot of people struggle with hand sanding. I mean, most people struggle. I struggled. We all struggle with hand sanding, especially when you're trying to get a mirror polish. And if you're a perfectionist like me or like Richie, it can be really frustrating because it's not an easy thing to do. And you think it would be. Pick up a piece of sandpaper, pick up a piece of titanium, you just sand it. Not so easy. So tip number one, invest in better quality sandpaper. It seems dumb, but it's important. You want to just spend a little bit more money, that's sandpaper, and also pick up wet or dry sandpaper. The sandpaper will last a lot longer. You'll have more even scratch patterns, and overall, just invest in better quality sandpaper. Tip number two, use water. I can't stress this enough. Using water makes you have a more even scratch pattern. You're not going to have random scraggles of, it's just important. You want an even scratch pattern. It makes it a lot easier as you're going through the process of progressing up through the grits. So, yeah. Tip number three, light pressure. I can't stress this. And this is actually like the most important tip that I'm going to give you guys today that I wish I'd known sooner. So sandpaper or sanding by hand sucks. It really, really sucks. And nobody likes to do it. It's really time consuming. And so half the time, you get a piece of sandpaper and you're just trying to get through that grit, and you're tired and your arms hurt, your hands are cramping, so you just want to get through it. So you press as hard as you can, just trying to remove the titanium faster. But in reality, what you're actually doing is you're leaving deep gouges in the titanium, and it's going to take way more time trying to remove those as you progress up in grit. So what will happen is you're doing that, you're sanding as hard as you can, and you go up in grits, and you're not going to realize how deep those scratches actually are. And once you start the polishing process, you aren't going to be able to get those scratches out because you press too hard. So using water will help with that too, but also using way less pressure, because the whole point is that you want to remove the previous scratch pattern from the previous grit. So use less pressure for sure. That's a big thing. Also, use fresh pieces of sandpaper. I know when I started, I would try and save that piece of sandpaper or stretch it as far as I could, make it last longer. But in reality, you want to be able to also remove the previous scratch pattern, but you also want to make a new scratch pattern. And when you keep using that same piece of sandpaper, you're not really going to be able to create the proper scratch pattern from that grit. So use fresh sandpaper. Don't cheap out. It's really important. Just try not to do that. I mean, I understand if budget's low or whatever, but it does make a big difference. Tip number 5. So when you're sanding, so say you're on 400 grit, here's your piece of titanium. Sand for 400 grit, sand it all in one direction. And then for, say, you've got your full scratch pattern there. When you go up in grit, say you're on 600 grit now, sand diagonally. And you want to the main thing is that you want to sand in a different angle than the previous grit, so that way you can watch and see if you've fully removed the previous scratch pattern, because the whole thing is that you want to keep removing each scratch pattern as you go up in grit, so that way you can get a perfect mirror polish. Another good tip, or it's not really necessary but it is useful, is picking up a granite plate. We were able to get ours for free. If you go to your local tile, stone, flooring shop and ask them if they have any scrap pieces of granite, more than likely they'll be able to give you a piece. And it's really useful to have on hand for making things flat, or checking to see if things are flat, which is nice. You can, if you're sanding and you want to sand a piece flat, throw a piece of sandpaper on it and just, have at it. However, it isn't going to tell you if things are level, so be careful when applying pressure, because you know, if you apply too much pressure in one area, it may be flat, but it may not be level. So that's another good tip. Another thing is when you're, I mean, this is, now the rest of these tips aren't necessary, but they are things that I think are good that I like to do. If you have pieces with, say how this has holes in it, you know, this is for a hex bit for the pry bar, I like to go in there and sand it and make the whole thing polished, the whole thing even. And you can just get a piece of sandpaper with your finger, and you go in there and you go, like, you can get a dowel, whatever, you know, just MacGyver something, figure something out. But it has a cleaner look overall. I personally, that's something I like to do. Another thing, so if you're sanding something that has been blasted, not bead blasted, because bead blast is like damn near, like, it's just super easy to remove. But if you're sanding something that's been blasted with aluminum oxide, garnet, glass, crushed glass, or anything else that's extremely abrasive, prepare yourself, because you're going to be sanding for a very long time if you're trying to get a mirror polish. It's really hard. So what happens is, you know, it's been blasted, and that media completely abrades the surface of that titanium. And what will happen is you'll be sanding, and as you go up in grit, if you don't fully remove that surface layer of titanium, you're going to end up with a really clouded mirror polish. And it's not going to be mirrored. It may be mirrored. You may end up with stippling, little stipples, dots all throughout, or but more often than not, if you really don't cut through that first layer of titanium, your surface finish is going to be extremely clouded, and it's not going to look very good. And you're going to go through all of your grits, and you're going to get to polishing, and you're going to be so disappointed, because you're going to have to go right back down again and start all over if you want a mirror polish. If you just want a high polish, you know, then whatever, that's fine. But it's actually, it's really not fine, because it'll still be there. It'll be clouded. You'll see the texturing, and it just looks like shit. I don't really, I mean, at least for me, I personally don't care for it, and I find that really frustrating. But yeah, so be prepared. It's going to take you twice as long, sometimes 3 times as long, to get it all off the surface of the titanium. Alright, so I guess I just want to go over the tips again. So tip number 1, invest in better quality sandpaper. Get wet or dry sandpaper. If you pick up sandpaper from Harbor Freight, you can go ahead and just throw it right in the trash can. Go online, go to TrueGrit.com. They have a bunch of sandpapers and abrasives. They just sell abrasives. They're local. They're here in California with where we are. And they sell good quality stuff. We use black ice sandpaper. It's also the same sandpaper that Todd Begg uses. That's not the reason why we bought it. We found that out after the fact. But yeah, so I like black ice. I think it's a really nice sandpaper. I always, you know, I get really nice even scratch patterns. It's good quality. Tip number 2, use water. Using water does make a huge difference in getting an even scratch pattern and not getting random deeper scratches here or there. Tip number 3, this is the most important tip that I have said this entire time, is using less pressure. Don't press hard. Don't try and just get it done, and press as hard as you can to make it quick, and what you really do is you end up leaving deep gouges in the titanium, and you have to go back and redo it all over again, because you will not be able to get a mirror polish. You will have dark or deep scratches still in your titanium. Tip number 4, use fresh sandpaper. Don't cheap out. Don't try and make that piece of sandpaper last. Just use fresh pieces, so that way you can lay down a new scratch pattern. Like I said, you want to remove each scratch pattern, but you also want to lay down a new scratch pattern, and using a fresh piece of sandpaper will allow you to do that. Using a worn piece of sandpaper, you're not going to be able to do that. All right, tip number 5. So every grit, sand in a different direction, as in, like, each grit sand. You know, if you're 400 grit, sand this way. You go to 600 grit, sand this way, and stay, you know, keep that same direction per grit. And then, like I said, you can also get a granite plate and I said a few other things, but those things aren't really necessary. Those are mainly just tips for sanding. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. All right, so If you like knives, if you like cats, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and leave me a comment down below with some feedback so that way I can grow the channel. All right, thanks so much for watching, guys. Catch you on the next one. Bye.